Welcome on board the National Geographic Seabird. For the next week, we're going to be exploring the beautiful, the wonderful, the most gorgeous scenery that one can possibly imagine here along the Pacific Northwest as we sail among the San Juan and the Gulf Islands. And we're going to venture a little further north to Alert Bay, where we're going to have the opportunity to share some of the life experiences of the native people of that community. We'll be hiking along the trails, kayaking along the coast, and simply enjoying the beauty and the splendor of the Pacific Northwest. Once again, welcome on board the Seabird. We hope you have a wonderful time and experience the magic and the splendor that this destination has to offer.
Welcome to Desolation Sound. We are in an area where George Vancouver first explored in the late 1700s and was inspired to call it Desolation Sound because it looked rather desolate. And we just landed in this intertidal zone here, this nice rocky beach covered in oysters, and we're making our way up into the woods to do some walking, stretch our legs.
So in the old days, the natives would find a big stand of cedars and they tend to congregate. And then a guy would climb up. You know, there wouldn't be any branches down here because of the competition when they were growing. And he would climb up with his adze and make a cut about 20 to 30 feet off the ground. And then he would start with a wedge and he would split off a board, and then he would do that again. So they didn't bother to cut the trees down. They just split boards off of living trees. And those boards were family treasures.
Today at Cove Haven. It's a really gorgeous spot here in British Columbia, and on one of the more beautiful days that I've seen in the past many weeks. Yeah, it's gorgeous out here. Good group of kayakers, a lot of people getting out, getting active and enjoying the scenery.
We've been sailing this morning and we've come across a number of different humpbacks in the water around us. they've been pretty active actually. A lot of the humpbacks that we've seen this morning are up here feeding. They'll spend their winter months down in Hawaii where they will go to mate and breed, but they'll be up here in British Columbia in order to feed in these really, really rich, productive waters. It's really fun to watch them dive and swim around us while we view them on the bow, but sometimes they even surprise us and do something a little bit different.
We're here in beautiful, sunny today, Alert Bay, outside the Umista Cultural Center. And in the Kwakwala language, Umista means restoration. And the reason it's called the Umista Cultural Center is that this is where the masks and dance regalia that was confiscated by the Canadian government in, I believe, 1913, have been repatriated. Now, they're not all here, but there's more on the way. And some of it is incredible artwork, just amazingly beautiful, amazingly well put together. And understanding what each piece is for is probably a lifetime's work, but it's sure fun to go through and just see, you know, what you can understand in one afternoon. It's a wonderful opportunity. So the cultural significance of a mask is, it's varied, but they're all used in the potlatch ceremony, which is used to delineate life events, births, deaths, marriages, divorces even. You know, all of those life events are celebrated with the potlatch, in which these masks are danced, as we say. And there are very specific masks for very specific dances, and they are often owned by a family. A song and a dance can be a form of property, just like a mask or a canoe. So when a mask is danced, it enhances its prestige.
I've been overwhelmed by the richness of the culture of these people, and their artwork is so amazing and complex and abstract, and it's just so interesting to hear their legends, and I've enjoyed it very much.
Later this afternoon, we're going to take the short walk up to the big house. The big house here is where all of the ceremonies take place. This is where all of life events are validated in a ceremony that we call potlatch. Some communities have a cathedral at their center. This is the center of the Kwakwaka'wakw community of Alert Bay. And we're going to see a sample of the songs and dances that are performed in the big house during a potlatch. Now, a potlatch is a ceremony to validate life events like births, namings, marriages, deaths, etc., whatever needs to be validated. We'll go into this very large house and see young people singing and dancing as they would if it was an actual potlatch. I really hope that people leave here understanding that in spite of all that they've heard about the vanishing American Indian and the dying cultures, that this is a vibrant, living culture, that these people are carrying on the traditions of their ancestors, and I hope they leave here with a great respect for the effort that they're putting forth to educate the rest of the world in who they are and what their needs are so that we can live together. That's my ultimate goal, is that we can live together with each other with respect and honor.
So we were in the water for 58 minutes. We went to 41 feet and the water was 49 degrees. This is Emily. I know you can tell, right? And so that's the dock just next to where we were on the ship, and that's how we get in. Just roll in. But once we get in there, the visibility was fantastic. I've never seen it that great there. There was at least 35 feet of visibility. And it's absolutely chock filled with life. So we are in Coldwater, which many people think does not have a lot of animals, does not have a lot of light. But it's different. So all of those cold water areas, they're actually filled with upwelling areas, and that's where we are right here. So the surface water blows off, deeper water comes up, it brings detritus, which are all these yummy things for the phytoplankton, and because of that, as well as those long summer days here, there's tons of food, so there's tons of life. So again, this is the dock where we were docked yesterday in Alert Bay, and that's Emily. Just a little size reference, there's some small fish, there's some anemones on those pilings, and we just spent a little while drifting. And when I say drifting, I mean the current was pushing us. So we went at slack tide, as you've learned now from Lynn. Slack tide is not always slack, and so we did a little bit of drifting. But these are plumose anemones, giant plumose anemones to be specific. And anemones are found in cold waters. Now these guys have this beautiful long stalk and all of these tentacles just around that center. So they have a tentacular crown. And those tentacles have stinging cells in them called nematocysts. And they get triggered upon touch. They're sort of like a little small harpoon. And those are inside of those tentacles. And the anemones will use those to catch prey. This is a small fringed sculpin, just a few inches long. You can see it's very well camouflaged into the piling, all of that around it. And this is perfect. They like to be in sort of silty or murky environments. They'll sit still because they think that you can't see them, so I'm not going to move. Now this is a different kind of sea star. This is a sunflower star, and they can be 1 meter wide in diameter. They are enormous. They can have up to 35 arms, but they start out with just 5 and then they add them. Not annually, but just as they get bigger. This one has specifically 20, because I counted. A different kind of sea star, and you might not even think of this as a sea star, but it is. They are an echinoderm, so they are sea stars, and in the center you have that 5-point or pentaradial symmetry. So you can see those 5 dark bands, and then around the edge are the arms, and they're all curled up. But this is when they splay them out. So they are called a basket sea star, and so when they reach those arms out and they unfurl all those little appendages, they create this beautiful basket, and these little small appendages are what's going to capture that that zooplankton, and that zooplankton is what they're going to eat. So they'll just extend their arms, create this beautiful basket, catch their food, and just sit there and eat. But sometimes they get a little full, and so they'll curl all of those little appendages back up, and they look like this tiny little sea star. And that's it from the side. So they really do create this almost bowl shape to them, and they're pretty special to see. You don't often see them, but you do, or I have seen them a couple times in this specific place that we were diving at Alert Bay. You can see the water column going back very quickly across the screen, and so you can see how it's able to catch all of those yummy things. Now again, I said echinoderm. Oh, this is that teapot that Steve mentioned yesterday. Obviously it's under the dock, so sometimes things happen. And this is my favorite thing I saw yesterday. I have never seen one of these before. This is a juvenile wolf eel. And so it is a fish. It is not an eel, although it has its name because it does have that sort of eel-like tail. And I've never seen one before. As I mentioned, these are the juvenile. I've seen an adult. An adult looks completely different. They are sort of light gray, sort of bluish tinted, and they have these gnarly teeth. And some people like to say it's a face only a mother could love. It's not pretty, but as a juvenile, they're fantastic. And so these guys will mate for life. They'll find a partner and a nice little den. The female will lay roughly 10,000 eggs, and together they will watch over them for about 16 weeks until they're hatched. And they'll return to that same den year after year, unless they're ousted by some sort of octopus or some other critter that wanted to make a home in that den. But they are really, really beautiful little critters. And they will eat mussels and quahogs, they'll eat crabs and many other things. And this small little wolf eel was just maybe 12 inches long, 13 inches long, and they can get quite large. And when they get large, they're commonly seen by divers in areas, and they sort of have a friendly relationship with divers at times. But this is generally what you'd see of an adult. You'll see a male and a female with just their heads peeking out of that den, and that's almost always what you see. So you don't often get to see the entire body like we saw with this juvenile one. Now, there was some small fish that were swimming when I first started the video, and those are rockfish. And there were two different species. There was the yellowfin rockfish as well as the Puget Sound rockfish. And they tend to be schooling fish, and they would hide in little crevices. So these are a couple of pilings close nearby to each other. And so these small schooling fish would just dart in. And I only generally see them when there's a bit of current. When there's not too much current, you find one or two sort of hiding in a crevice. But when there's just that little bit of current going, and little bit, I mean a lot bit yesterday, but when there's that current going, you'll see them just sort of swimming head into it. All of the things that I've shown you are these beautiful, brilliant colors. Even those sponges that are on that piling, those beautiful yellow sponges, which are just filter feeding out some of that water. But again, a lot of life here. And so this is one of mine and Lynn and Emily's favorite places to dive. And it's just a dock. It's just where we were yesterday, overlooked by so many people, but so much life down there. And that's pretty common with a lot of these cold water places, that you find all of this beautiful life. Well, thank you for joining me tonight, guys.
Well, we came ashore at Wallace Island today. This is a long, narrow island that we had an opportunity to hike on. It's got some interesting history and kind of quirky in a way. There's some interesting characters in the past and some buildings that still remain from a resort that was once here. And then there's an old truck that we had an opportunity to photograph. Part of the history here includes a hermit that came here and lived all by himself, and the northern point of this island is named after him, Chivers Point. He lived here by himself until he died at the age of 92. So a lot of interesting past history here.
My father had a truck like this. In fact, I may have driven it even after I learned to drive. It was a Willie. We called it a Willie, and it was gray. And I can't think of much else detail about it. I don't know how long we had it, but it was the late 40s.
I just love these madrone trees, arbutus trees that have this beautiful peeling red and green bark. They're an evergreen broadleaf tree, which is really unusual for this area. The farther north you go, the more coniferous trees there are. So this is a little unusual. It is found in a little bit drier areas. So we're on the Gulf Islands, and these are in the rain shadow of not only Vancouver Island and the range there, but also the Olympic Peninsula.
Victoria is a place that people come to because it seems quaint. It's got a British connection. Many people walk around and feel that Britishness exuding from its pores. But it's actually got a very long and complicated past. It was a gold rush town too. So it was like the Wild West with dirt streets and wooden false-fronted buildings, but because it was a British colony, it had a twist. It was like the Wild West with a British accent, and many people find that very intriguing. Eventually though, Victoria grew up as a gold rush city and the capital of British Columbia, and that's why we have British Columbia's provincial legislative assembly buildings, the parliament buildings, designed by a man at the age of 25 years old. The buildings opened in 1898. His name was Francis Mawson Rattenbury. So we had a refreshment stop at one of my favorite pubs in town, a place called the Bard and Banker. It was an old bank building. That's where the bank and the name comes from. What about the Bard? Well, that's Robert Service, Klondike Gold Rush poet extraordinaire. He eventually became known as the Bard of the North. But today we've had a chance to explore more than just the harbour side. We got as far as Chinatown, which is the oldest Chinatown in Canada. The people coming through Chinatown were actually helping build Canada, and there are real parallels with the history of the Chinese coming to the US as well. But for me as a historian, it's really fun to be able to unpack and talk about the differences between how Victoria developed and how other gold rush towns like San Francisco did. None of this was a foregone conclusion. You know, it seems to people looking back now that Victoria would always be a part of Canada, but that really wasn't the case. And as a historian, we get to go into the nuances of these stories as we walk around the beautiful streets of Victoria, and what a stunning day for it too. This is the kind of day when I think I've got the best job in town. Because not only do I get to research these stories, I get to bring these stories out and share them with intrepid historical explorers like the people from these expeditions.
I started my garden about, 30 years ago. This January of '89 was when I started my garden. I was a novice. I had to learn by reading, which I did for 10 years, believe it or not. 10 years of reading in the evening. Just learning about plants and the conditions under which they like to grow. And from doing that, I gradually developed my own garden. So as I learned about gardening, I was visiting nurseries a lot. And in the end, I think I've managed to create a garden that is interesting throughout the whole year, starting in January with, different things blooming and going right through till the end of October. I've learned that blooms are really important, but equally as important, if not more so, is foliage and texture, contrast. Structure of trees is extremely important. So, you want things that look good for as long as possible. And also you want things that are not fussy. You don't want to be continually, nursing something. You want it to be robust and to look good, for as long as possible.
It's an amazing garden with tremendous variety and colors and planning. A lot of thought went into this, so you appreciate that.
This evening, we had the chance to visit the Robert Bateman Gallery. And Robert Bateman is, he's always labeled as one of the premier Canadian artists, wildlife artists. But to me, he's one of the premier wildlife artists, period. It really crosses borders. And that was a real treat to see his work, so many pieces of his work on display at one place.
Friday Harbor on San Juan Island. It's a quaint little town with ferry service from Seattle and some of the other islands around here. So you have to get here by boat or by seaplane. And it's a very beautiful day and a wonderful place to visit. It's also home of the Whale Museum that has lots of information about the killer whales, also known as orcas, that inhabit this area. And so they have videos, they have some skeletons, they have lots of information about these animals.
Welcome to Jones Island. This is a really cute little island which is actually entirely a state park, and it is covered by hiking trails. Lucky us. We're going to be doing a loop of approximately 1 mile in length for the next approximate hour-ish, and we'll be plowing through the forest and then wandering along the coast and then coming back through the forest, all on trails. Trails are in good shape. So this is a young buck. Looks like a black-tailed deer. The weird part is all that white speckling in the rear end. The deer here are extremely prolific on Jones Island, to a point that locally people call it Deer Island. A lot of boaters that come by here have gotten in the habit of literally hand feeding the deer. Hey, well, this is a great hike.
Amy and I went diving in Friday Harbor, and it was a gorgeous dive. All this kelp and bare rock covered in life. We came across 2 red rock crabs, a male embracing a female, waiting for her to molt. As soon as that female crab molts, then she'll be ready to mate. We also encountered so many gorgeous nudibranchs. They were of all different colors, oranges and pinks and yellows and white. There was a frosted nudibranch that has those huge serrata. Those are the wavy things that are coming out of their backs. And nudibranchs are essentially sea slugs, and they have these bright colors almost as a warning. Frequently nudibranchs are not edible to many creatures, and they're able to store usually the stinging cells of hydroids or bryozoans that they eat. So animals that are able to sting other creatures, a nudibranch, when it eats it, can use it as its own defense mechanism, which is really cool. There was a feeding red sea cucumber, and this is really fun to watch because they're so active. You can see one tentacle go into the mouth and get scraped off. What's happening is these tentacles are gathering plankton or detritus floating by, and you can see those little bits getting stuck, and then it's just dipping it in its mouth and licking it off, essentially. Diving in British Columbia it's one of my favorite places to dive. Number one, there's so much color. I don't think people expect to see these bright colors in a temperate region. And it's full of life. I mean, there's all different kinds of life, whether it's algae or undersea snails or fish, nudibranchs. It's just really diverse. And just to see all these creatures living so close together and interacting, it's really beautiful.
Well, I think the area is beautiful, this northwest area that we've driven through, or I guess cruised through on a larger boat, but never had the chance to get up this close and personal with nature.
Yeah, we've really enjoyed the wildness of the area, just the sea and the woods and the great Northwest. So yeah, enjoyed it.
Oh, the area is just beautiful, more so than I even thought it would be. The learning experiences have been good because I never thought about all the little critters on the pylons, and we were able to see those right off the boat one evening. The climate's wonderful for us. The cool nights, the sunny days, even the cloudy days were great. I cannot think of another place that I've been that could be in such a small area that you could cruise from one place to another and enjoy each place so much.